You know, if you're thinking about buying or selling in the Denver suburbs before the end of the year, the numbers are sending a wake-up call, but it's not the one you'd expect. Sellers see prices still holding and think, oh, I can push my price a little, or my home is good as is. Buyers see more listings and more price rejections and think, sellers must be desperate. This might be my chance to steal a house. And both are wrong. And both are how people get themselves in trouble in a market like this one. This isn't the market from a few years ago, but it's also not one where buyers get to assume desperation or sellers assume buyers won't notice. So today, let's look at what this market is telling buyers and sellers right now, before your assumptions cost you time, money, or options. Here's what's actually happening in the Denver metro area right now, and it's not what you're hearing. You know, if you're a buyer listening to the media, you're hearing buyer's market, the sellers are desperate, and prices are dropping. That's not really what the numbers say, though. According to the latest Denver market report from DMAR, prices are still slightly up from a year ago. Homes priced right are still getting close to full asking price, and even with more listings on the market than last month, Denver actually has fewer homes for sale than it did at this time last year. This is not a buyer's market, but it's not a seller's market of a few years ago either. Yeah, homes are taking longer to sell, and because of that, buyers have more to choose from than they did even 6 months ago. And that's rattling both sides because everyone's still using the old playbook. Part of what's driving buyer behavior right now is mortgage rates. They're not falling the way people had hoped, and that's changing how buyers are thinking, not just about what they can afford to offer, but what they'll have left over once they own the home. That's why you're seeing more buyers asking for rate buy downs now, or buyers are negotiating more seller concessions because the mortgage payment isn't the only number they're worried about anymore. They're thinking about next spring when something breaks. And on the seller side, that longer time on the market, well, that doesn't mean panic. It means homes that are prepared and priced right are moving, and the ones that aren't are the ones sitting, adjusting, and maybe starting to feel like they're chasing the market. So there's no crash and there's no frenzy either. Just a market in the Denver metro area right now where both sides have to work together to get homes moving, instead of assuming one or the other side is desperate. Remember a few years ago, what I call the nirvana phase of real estate? Oh, it was wonderful for home sellers. An end-of-the-life roof, tired fencing, cracked concrete in the driveway, buyers would bypass it completely. And in some cases, they'd write an offer and skip any real inspection beyond the touring they did of the home. That's not happening anymore. I recently toured a beautiful home with my buyers. Gorgeous inside, lovely garden out back. And still, my buyers immediately pointed out the top of the fencing that needed some work, hardly noticeable. And they asked about the yard maintenance it would take to keep up the yard. Things that even a couple of years ago just weren't coming up when we walk through homes. That's because when buyers have options, they don't have to overlook things anymore. Now here's one that surprised even me. I had a buyer's agent come to me recently on a listing I have, before we'd even had an inspection, asking if my seller would build out a room for the furnace and HVAC system, one that didn't exist, and replace the water heater in their offer before inspection, before we knew what, if anything, actually needed work. Now normally, the order is the other way. You negotiate price and terms, you do your inspection, and then you find out what's actually going to be keeping you up at night, not before. So I asked the agent about it directly, and she told me something interesting. She likes to throw in a request like that early, she said, just to see if the seller's willing to work with them. It's not that the furnace room was falling apart, it's a test. Now, is that going to become more common as buyers get more comfortable negotiating? Or was that just this agent's move on this particular seller? I don't know yet, but it tells you something either way. Buyers and their agents are testing flexibility earlier in the process than they used to. Hey, just curious, would you have called that out as a test or taken it at face value? Let me know in the comments. And sellers, that's not a reason to get defensive. It's a reason to know what you're actually willing to negotiate on before someone asks. So what does all this actually mean if you're thinking about buying, selling, downsizing, or right-sizing before the end of the year? It means assumptions that used to be safe, well, they're not safe anymore. And if you're a seller thinking, I'll just price it a little high and see what happens, that's not the same low-risk move it was a few years ago. Buyers have more to compare to now, and they're paying attention to condition in a way that they weren't before. And if you're a buyer thinking, sellers must be desperate, I can lowball and take my time, that's not quite right either. Well-priced, well-prepared homes are still moving. Patience helps you, assuming desperation doesn't. This is a market that rewards people who actually do their homework on both sides. I'm curious, if you're on the fence about a move, I want to know what's actually holding you back right now. Is it the market? Is it knowing what your home is worth right now? Is it not knowing where you'd go next? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're the kind of person who likes to think a few steps ahead instead of reacting in the moment, that's exactly who I built the What's Next guide for. It's not a sales pitch. It's a way to actually think through whether you're still in the right home for your next chapter. We've even added questions to ask yourself before the market or someone else makes that decision for you. The link's down below. And if you're a seller wondering what any of this means for getting your home ready, I actually covered that in a recent video on the upgrades Denver sellers should be careful with before they spend a dime. Watch that one next. Hi, if we haven't met, my name's Peggy Dursthoff with Live Denver Suburbs, powered by HomeSmart, and I'll see you in the next video.